In this exercise, we will practice some operations on the Python built-in data types. In the first question, we have two variables, the variable student and the variable grade. And the question is asking us to format to combine the two variables, such as we see something like the grade of the student name is the grade of the student plus percentage. So basically, it's a concatenation of these two values. So one way to do it is to construct a string such as the grade of and then plus student. This is basically concatenating the string value with a string variable here. So far so good, so I'm going to put another string is space, and again so far so good, and then I'm going to put grade, and here things kind of fall apart. And what's going on in here is that Python doesn't have an automatic rule to convert a float to string. We need to force this conversion by casting the value grade, because the value is the type float to a string using the str function, the constructor of the string data type. And that will be the grade of the student is the value of the variable grade, and I'm going to put a percentage at the end. Now once again we see the quotes here because this is the value of this expression, and Python always provides some cues for us to know what's the type of this value, and the type of this value is a string, and we don't know that because of the cues. If we use the function print, those quotes will not be shown up, it's only the content of the string that will be printed. So this is one way to combine different values by concatenating them to string. Now we will be talking about string in more details in the next lecture, but I just want to give you a sneak peek of formatting longer strings from shorter strings. We can use what we call a formatted string. Basically, a formatted string is a template. The template is populated by values of variables from the notebook. We can create a formatted string by starting the string with an F for formatted and then typing a string value. For instance, the grade, whatever. Well, this value here is just a string value, so actually what we see is a string value, the grade, for instance, of. Now, because this is a formatted string, it allows us to plug in variables from the notebook inside it. So I can do here a variable, and I need to indicate the variable in two curly brackets, and I'm going to put the variable student here. And this will tell me that the grade of the student name is the grade of Sammy, right? Because student is a variable. Now it's important that the magic here is linked to having a formatted string. If I delete this F here in the beginning, I'm going to get the whole thing verbatim, the grade of curly bracket student curly bracket. If I want Python to format this using the variable, I need to put I need to start with a formatted string. And obviously I need the two brackets here. Without the two brackets, I get the grade of student. Okay, so two essential things, starting with F and putting the variables in brackets. I can continue here is, and actually I don't need to convert. I can do string grade if I wish, but that's not needed. A formatted string is smart enough to know that I want to put values within a string, so it will auto-format it to become a string. So, and I'm going to put the percentage sign. That's the formatted string, and it's kind of a very kind of time savior, especially when we are creating a string by combining multiple pieces and combining multiple variables. It saves us doing the plus, it saves us doing the explicit conversion of other variables. The formatted string was added to Python as a feature in version 3.6. before version 3.6, we had to call a function called format to do the formatting. So in your textbook, which uses the Python version 3.5, you'll see something like this. The grade of 0 is 1%. So 0 and 1 are the placeholders where we want to put the variables, and then dot format student and grade. It's basically the same idea, and the formatted string is much nicer to write and read. So I'm going to use this formatted string syntax rather than this one, and you only need this one if you have an old version of Python, which you have no reason of having an old version of Python anyhow. Now the next question is asking us to convert the grade to an integer and then reformat the output to be the grade of, Sammy is 88%. So it's basically asking us to drop the decimal point. So we can do something like this. We can do grade2 is equal to int grade. That's the explicit conversion. And then with this one, we can either do a concatenation or a formatted string. So let's do a concatenation first. The grade of student plus is plus, once again, I need to convert this to a string explicitly. I cannot concatenate an integer with a string. But because this is grade 2, I will get to 88. I mean, obviously, instead of doing this in 2 steps, I could have done this in one shot. That's also possible here. A point in here is that I converted my float to an integer, and then I converted my integer to a string. Similarly, in a formatted string, I will write a template. The grade of student is, and here I'm going to put int grade %. And I get this same output. Now the formatted string also has some formatting directive, optional formatting directive. So indeed, I don't need to do the conversion here. I can put grade here, and I can tell the formatted string, like, look at this grade and format it as a floating point number. So I can tell the optional formatting by put this column and put a formatting directive. We will see this in the future and we'll talk about it in more details. For the purpose of this exercise, I want to format it as it's a floating point number, but I don't want to have any decimal points, and that's the 0.0f, and I will get the same result. This is a very useful feature because if you master this formatting directive, it's possible to format it in multiple ways. For instance, you can tell it that you want 1 decimal point or 2 decimal points. Or 3 decimal points, and so on and so forth. You can tell it that you want to format it in a scientific notation rather than a floating point notation. So for example, you can tell it that you want 1e, and it will show up as 8.8 times 10 to the power of 1, which is 8.8. So it gives you a wide variety of formatting options. You don't need to do any conversion or any mathematics to get the value formatted. Okay, let's finish the remaining question. What's the type of student? We know the type of student is a string, and the function type will tell us that. What's the first character in student? The first character is capital S, and we can get to that character by indexing the string, and the first character is at location 0, so we get S. What's the type of the first character in student? Well, it's here, so we see the Q, which is quote S quote, which means it's a string. If I want to be explicit about it, I do type student 0, and I will get string. Now, This question is very useful if you're coming to Python from Java. Because in Java, you know that a string is a sequence of characters, and there is actually a built-in data type called char for character. In Python, there is no char. Any single character value is also a string. So it's also important to know that. And when you index a string, for instance, index at 0, you get a string. In Java, the char add function gives you a character from a string. So there is nothing as a char here. A single character is also a string.